made notes. Hi gang, welcome back to my channel. I'm Grace and this is my book place. Today I thought that we would do the end of year book tag. I'll link Ariel Bissett's video down below because she created this tag and it's her video that I watched that inspired me to do it. So let's just jump into the questions, shall we? Question 1. Are there any books you started this year that you need to finish? Yes, and I'll go through them. So there's a few. I have, unfortunately, especially with non-fiction, I have a bit of a habit of starting something and then putting it down and not picking it up for months because I'm quite a slow non-fiction reader, and like I said in my last video, I love non-fiction and I find it really fascinating and I enjoy taking in non-fiction. But because I'm such a fantasy fiction reader as a general rule, sometimes I think that the motivation isn't always there to pick up a non-fiction read, which sucks, and I'm working on it. But most of these are non-fiction, but a couple of them aren't. A couple of them are buddy reads. So the first one is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I read Circe earlier this year. It's currently my favourite. I had to think about it, but I think it's currently my favourite read of the year so far. The reason that it's taking a while to get through this one, I'm about halfway, is because I'm buddy reading it with my friend Ali, and she lives in America, so it can take, and when we buddy read, when I say buddy read in this regard, it's not like you just read pages separately. We read out loud together, to each other over the phone. So that's why this is taking a while, because our version of buddy reading is reading out loud to each other. So we have to both be on a call and be available for that to happen, which is why this is taking a little while, because there's big gaps in between when we can catch up with each other and have some time for reading with the time zone differences and stuff. So that's the first one. And then starting in on my non-fiction, and some of these are a bit embarrassing with just how this one doesn't even have a bookmark in it, but oh no, it does. I found it. Okay, so I am 16 pages in of this book that has 158 pages, so I'm not that far in at all, but I've started it. So that is Breaking Bread with the Dead by Alan Jacobs. This is a non-fiction book sort of about arguing for why we should read classics, but also just books generally from times that were less politically correct, or I think it's just discussing the ways in which we can learn about the human experience and our history and find comfort in old reads while still acknowledging that they can be problematic for our modern time view. I don't know. Like I said, I'm only 16 pages in, so I'll probably update that summary if it's incorrect when I've actually finished it. So that's the second one. Another one which I'm literally I'm about to finish, basically. I've got this much left. But that's Equal by Katya Adams, which is just something that I'm reading about how men and women quite rightly should be considered equal in church scenarios. So that's cool. My husband has just finished reading it and really enjoyed it. I've taken a really long time to read it because I'm just not very good at non-fiction. I started reading it before he did and have been reading it for weeks, and he finished it in a couple of days. So just shows how bad I am at reading non-fiction, but it's good. So I need to finish that soon. The next one is Women Don't Owe You Pretty by Florence Given. I mainly wanted to read this because of all the controversy surrounding it, and I wanted to see what I thought and everything, but I'm not far in enough to know what I think. I'm 66 pages in. It is technically quite a quick read because there's a lot of images and pages like this and stuff. It's a very pretty book. I will hopefully finish it at some point because it's just worth being in the know about these things. Next one is The Trials of Apollo Book 2, The Dark Prophecy by Rick Riordan. The reason this one is taking so long, because this is like, you know, this is right up my alley. I love this stuff. But so it's obviously not non-fiction, so I should be reading it quicker. But it's because I am buddy reading this one with my husband, and in a similar fashion to me and Ali, we read to each other. So I will sit while he plays FIFA or something, and I will read out loud to him. But this year we've read 3 of the Percy Jackson books, because I'd already read the first 2. He's already read all of that. Read all of the Heroes of Olympus books, and now we're on the Trials of Apollo books, and this is the second one. So that's 9 books that we have read together this year already, and we read them in quite like quick succession. I think it sort of led for my husband to a little bit of reading burnout, so we're taking a break, which is why we haven't got very far with this one. I think we're only we're on chapter 2. Ooh. Hopefully soon we'll pick that back up again, but because of the nature of having to find time to read to each other, and for both of us to be in the mood to read and to read the same sort of thing and everything, that's why this one's taking a little bit longer, but that's okay. Because like I said, we've already read 9 books together this year, and that's pretty good. And then the final one is David Mitchell's Dishonesty is the Second Best Policy, which is probably the one that I have been reading the longest in this collection. There are 2 books that I started before this year that didn't make this, because this was specifically about books started this year. So we're going to ignore that the other 2 books that I haven't finished exist. This one has been on for quite a while. I think this has been on my TBR like 6 times, and I started reading it in January. And I'm a decent way into it. On page 107. And like I said, like with all of these things, it's not that I'm not enjoying it. I love David Mitchell, and this was, I must have started reading it in January, because I think this was a birthday present from my mum, because I requested it. So I do really enjoy it. It's just that I end up reading a fiction or something else that I really want to sink my teeth into, and then I come back and dip into this, because this is sort of, I think it's like a collection of some of the articles he's written, so like each one is like a piece about something different, so you can just like finish a bit and then walk away. So that's the last one. So those are all of the books that I have started this year, and to my shame have not yet finished. That is an entire TBR stack. Question 2. Do you have any autumnal books to transition into the end of the year? Or an autumnal book to transition into the end of the year? Because I'm doing this tag a little bit late, I think people usually do this earlier in this month. I have read one that I think has transitioned me quite well, which is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. I've just recently finished this one. I read it in one night because I couldn't put it down. And I will not say anything else about it, because it will be in this month's wrap up. So I can't say much else about that, but it's a thriller, it's a mystery, and it's set in Cambridge, and I think all of those things made me feel like, yes, I am autumn ready, I am prepared for the seasonal change, because it just felt like all of the imagery of Cambridge just felt very cozy autumnal vibes. So yes, but for books that I have not read yet that I think will help with that transition, I think I said this last video, but I'm not a thriller horror reader. I like creepy stuff and I like thrilling stuff, but I don't go out of my way to read actual thrillers and mysteries. I recently picked up The Lamplighters by Emma Stonix. So I think that this will, because I'm in the mood for thrillers, and because often thrillers take place in very sort of like colder weather vibes because we associate those things, I think that this might help with the transition as well. I'm quite excited. I don't know much about it, but I think there's a mystery to do with shining. I think there's a mystery to do with lighthouse keepers who, like 3 separate lighthouse keepers who went missing in the lighthouse, though the door was locked from the inside, and it's that sort of unraveling that mystery. And I could be wrong, but I think that's what this is about. I'm not going to dive any deeper because I don't tend to like to do that, because I like to go into things a little bit blind, but I'm excited about that. So that I think will help. And then another one, which I've been dying to read for ages, is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. I have not yet read a Grady Hendrix, but everything that I see like they've put out looks great and like sort of right up my alley in a way. And there's a lot of 80s inspired stuff, which I think is very cool. And I have read the sort of foreword, author's note, not foreword. I've read the author's note, and I think in that the sort of thing was, this is pitting their 80s housewife book club mom against Dracula, and the insinuation that Dracula has no chance. And I love that, and I love vampires, and I love the 80s, and this just feels like so good for me. It feels like everything that I love in a book. But I also think because it's supposed to be genuinely a little bit scary at points. So I think that means that it might also help with the transition into like autumnal vibes. And like sort of I imagine because of that the setting will be a little bit like that. I don't know, I could be wrong, but we'll see. Question 3. Is there a new release you're still waiting for? I don't think so. Yeah, I think all of the releases this year that I was excited for have already happened. I still have yet to read many of them, as we can see from my TBR cart. So I'm more thinking, I think, at the moment in terms of what do I already own that I'm really excited to read, regardless of when it came out. So there are anticipated reads that I have, but I don't think there's any more anticipated releases. I think like one of the ones I can think of was The Stranding by Kate Sawyer, that I was particularly really excited about because we looked at it briefly when we were talking about acquisitions and pitches in our publishing lectures. And I've already read it, so that was one of the ones I was most excited for this year. I think my next that comes to mind, my next big anticipated release isn't until 2022, and that is Harley Black's Book of Night, which I've already pre-ordered. So I'm sure there are plenty of others that I'm just not thinking of now that I'm like, yes, I'm going to be very excited for that. But at the moment, that's the only book that I am aware I'm very eager for, because I will read anything Harley Black does, basically. Question 4. What are 3 books you want to read before the end of the year? Well, okay, so I am one of those people, and I think a lot of us readers are, not all, which is valid and fine, but a lot of us are very much pro read the book before the show or the movie or whatever. And that's me. I fall into that category. Like before the Shadow and Bone series, like TV series came out, I binge read the entire trilogy, even though before that point I had no interest in reading it. But I was like, I have to now because the show is forcing my hand. I cannot watch this show without reading the books, and I didn't love the show anyway. But I did enjoy the books from a sort of putting my teenage brain back on way. I still much prefer Six of Crows, but that's a whole different discussion and we'd be here all day. The books that I would like to read before the end of the year include Dune, because I'm excited for the movie. I'm going to be taking my mum to see the movie because she's a big sci-fi movie fan. So I need to read it for me before I go and watch the movie with her. Grace from the future here. Apparently the end of this I'm going to shut the window. When I went to do the editing for this video, I discovered that for some reason the latter part of the original recording had, I don't know, corrupted or just not recorded properly. So I'm going to finish the questions like this. Otherwise there's no video. and I'd like for there to be a video. So, what was I saying? What are 3 books you want to read before the end of the year? Okay, so I already said Dune, because I want to go and see that with my mum when it comes out, and I want to read it before it comes out. Along similar lines, a non-specific number of Wheel of Time books are included in this. I know it says 3 books, but I'd like to read as many as possible before the end of this year, or at least before the show comes out. I wasn't actually aware of the existence of Wheel of Time before the show was announced, which is not great for my identity as a fantasy reader, but I know about it now. I'm rectifying the situation, but I would like to have at least read the first book before the show comes out, preferably more than 1 book, because obviously the manner of adaptations means that certain things that happen in later books might have to happen in the first season of the show for world building purposes and storylines having to move from book form to TV form. So yes, I've already started the first one on Kindle or on ebook, but I am not that far in. I've read the prologue / preface, and that's it. So I have a lot of reading ahead of me for that, but I would like to at least get the first one, preferably the first 2, done before the show airs. So pray for me. For the third one, the third choice was, yes, I answered all of these questions and I put all my books away, and last time I had them all out ready. It was the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, which I know cropped up a lot in the first part of this video, but it's because I truly have had this book on my TBR for so long, and it is at the top of my TBR. So I would love to have at least gotten through this one. I want to get through a lot of my TBR, maybe before the end of the year, or, a decent amount. But I would like to definitely get through this one before the year finishes, just for a personal goal. Question 5. Is there a book you think could still shock you and become your favourite book of the year? Yes, several, which I know isn't helpful for being specific with these questions, but I have in my trusty notes. I've written down any thrillers and horrors. As someone who doesn't tend to gravitate towards thrillers and horrors that much, not because I don't like them or because I get too scared, just because I'm always picking up something fantastical, which obviously their crossovers happen and everything, but I've been particularly in the mood for thrillers and spooky stuff recently, like the past few months. I've just really wanted to take all of that in. So there is potential for me to discover some really great thrillers and horrors, because I haven't read too much of those genres. So anything like that, some of the ones that I've mentioned, like Lamplighters, I've got My Sister the Serial Killer and stuff like that. So yes. Other ones are, again, getting books out that I had somewhat prepared last time. So my 2 favourite books of this year, which were Circe and The Stranding, they talk a lot about gender and feminism and all of that stuff. So I know that sort of topic is right up my alley. So The Manningtree Witches by A.K. Blakemore and Detransition Baby by Tori Peters, I think could be contenders based on that, because obviously they both talk about gender, and I am really hoping that I enjoy the discussions within, and that could mean that they could be potential favourites. The other thing I have is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, or The Song of Achilles. These mainly based on the fact that Circe is my favourite book of the year so far. Obviously another Madeline Miller. I'm halfway through, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm loving it so far. If the ending is really great, it may be on par, I don't know, with Circe, but I have loved the only Madeline Miller book I've read so far, and I'm loving this one, so it could be a potential favourite. And then Susanna Clarke's Piranesi, it's Greek retelling, or at least based on Greek myths to my knowledge. And there's a quote from Madeline Miller on the back, and Erin Morgenstern and David Mitchell, who are both great fantastical abstract writers, or at least writers who write fantastical and abstract storylines. So this could be a potential favourite. Question 6. Have you already started making reading plans for next year? Yes and no. Yes, because I have made one plan for what I will read in January. Like the books that I've mentioned I have finished one of them since recording that, so I think I finished Equal by Katya Adams or something, but the rest of them are still unfinished. If those remain unfinished for the rest of the year, then my plan is in January to do as I guess a New Year's resolution, though I don't really do those, but in a way, as a New Year's resolution or to make the reading slate clean, my plan is to have January's TBR be all the books I have not yet finished, so that for the rest of the year I can start from the beginning and hopefully finish, unless I DNF for other reasons and don't plan to finish, but finish all the books I want to the rest of the year without thinking, oh, I should be reading that one because I haven't finished it. And that will include the 2 books that I did not mention in the first part that I started before this year and have not yet finished, which I think are Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. So I'm like partway through that, and I have the sequel and the novella to read, so I really need to finish it. And then, what's the other one? Oh, it's hidden. It's Philip Pullman's Grimm Tales. So his retelling of the Grimm fairy tales, which I have like in my own crude way, tabbed and stuff, and have really been enjoying reading, and I'm here. So yeah, anyway, it's Philip Pullman's Grimm Tales for young and old, which I love fairy tales, and I sort of was working my way through this one for a while and then just kind of stopped. And so I need to finish that because Philip Pullman writes well, and he says some cool stuff about fairy tales and oral storytelling and oral tradition and all of that stuff, and it's cool. So those are the 2 that I know of outside of this year that I started and have not finished. More might crop up. I would not be surprised to find that I've started more books and just not finished them. But my plan is, for the ones I'm aware of, that in January I will create a TBR based on that and just finish all the books that I need to finish, which could be a bad idea because it's mostly non-fiction and I struggle with that, but we move. But other than that, no plans, because I'd like to, especially with starting a booktube and stuff, I'd like to keep the year free in a way, so that I can join readathons and read-alongs and book clubs and things like that. So no plans for reading next year apart from Holly Black's Book of Night, because I will read that as soon as it arrives. But other than that, free as the wind. So let me know if you think there's something I should do in the new year or next year for reading, if there's anything in particular that you think would be cool. But yeah, those are the questions on the end of year book tag, which was fun. The next video you see from me will be a wrap-up / TBR, and I've got a potentially entertaining plan for the TBR section of that video. Thank you for hanging out with me in my book place, and hopefully I'll see you again soon. Bye!